It's so exciting to be here in this setting, and also that somebody pronounced my name right. Yeah, my purpose here today is to break it down a little bit to the nuts and bolts of what game mechanics are. I do have a talk too, if I can find it. Excellent. And it has two parts. The first part is the constituents of games. What are game mechanics? And what can we do with them? And for the second part, what we can do with them, I chose an example from my own work, Elude, as a case study. It's a game about depression, just to show a little bit where games can go and how you can design for a specific message or outcome or experience. But first things first. So what are game mechanics? You're gamers, many of you. I saw a lot of hands up before. But how many game designers do we have here? Oh, so many. So I hope I don't bore you, but I will talk. So it was good for me to do this talk because breaking it down to the very basics really helps to not forget about the most profound things of game design. So game mechanics, this is where the game lives. This is what makes it operate, the machinery behind it. If you strip away all the aesthetics, all the eye candy, all the music, unless you have a music game, what remains are the game mechanics. This is how the game ticks. And they include the game space. I use the term object, so if the purpose of this talk is also to introduce the vocabulary. I think later on I will refer to objects as components, so don't be confused. The rules and the actions of the game. The most basic paradigm of games, it's something that helps me a lot when I start designing a new game, is to think about the game space. Where does it all happen? What prepares the stage? And the game space can be many things. It can be outside, and you just define how far it goes, or maybe you don't even set up clear boundaries and you can run wherever. It can be a virtual space, like in EverQuest or World of Warcraft or any other computer game that you might know. It can be the world outside as it passes by when you drive these car driving games where you have to guess the object somebody has in mind. We've all played these games. So then the game space is both outside and inside the car, where the social space is where the game is happening. And it can also be a game board, as everybody knows, and that's defined by the boundaries of the board, obviously. And then there's a metaphorical interpretation of game space as well, and that's what people refer to as the magic circle. When we start playing the game, then we enter this magic circle where new rules apply and where we agree to certain terms and conditions. And when we're done playing, we go back to normal mode and roles reverse again, and it's everything back to how it used to be. So the magic circle is something we enter when we start playing a game. And what is important to keep in mind is that game spaces are functional spaces. They are defined by what we can do in them. They are not so much defined by their aesthetics, although that's important for the experience too of the game, but they're mostly defined by how they organize the game components and set up relationships between them. So in a game of tic-tac-toe, what counts are the boundaries between the squares, and not so much the squares themselves. So it doesn't really matter if I put my little cross up here or down there, but it does matter if I put it there. So that's, when we think of a game space, don't get distracted by, I want to put a little flower in the corner, unless that's something that you need for playability. And then when you have the game space, you want to populate it with something, because a game is all about what you can do in it, right? So there are the components, and these components are the nouns of the game, if you want to look for a familiar analogy. And these components can have attributes and states that determine how they work in the game space. In a game of soccer, for example, I didn't choose football because I'm from Austria, so soccer is much more familiar to me. I don't get football at all. So I understand you're getting frustrated at your girlfriend. My boyfriend is trying to explain it to me too. I was like, what? Wait, really? Anyways, so in a game of soccer, the components are obviously the ball, but also the players are part of they have different roles too. So in a way, they're also components, I think. In a game of Parcheesi, you have the game board. It sets up the space, but the components are the little guys that you move around according to certain rules. And then you can have components that are in your head, like the I pack my suitcase game. I don't know, does anybody know here? Yes, no? So that's another one of these car driving. I did a lot of driving or it was driven around when I was a kid. So the car driving game, I pack my suitcase and I put in it a toothbrush, a pair of socks, and an apple. And then the next player goes, I pack my suitcase and I put in it a toothbrush, a pair of socks, an apple, and a dead mouse. And on it goes until somebody messes up and can't remember all the million absurd things that you put into the suitcase. But these are components too, and you have to remember them, and that's where the conflict and the challenge comes in and makes it a game. Some games go so far that they owe their names to their game components, like rock, paper, scissors. I'm sure everybody knows that. The attributes of the rock, the paper, and the scissor, the very salient attributes, they set up the relationship of domination and submission in this game. This is where what you do in the game comes from. So the rock will always beat the scissor because the rock is hard, of course. And the scissor, its salient attribute is that it can cut stuff, so it sets up the domination over the paper. But the paper is, and I think that's a little bit flimsy here, but the paper can envelop the rock, and so it wins over the rock or something. What is really important here is that these objects are balanced. So, does anybody know Big Bang Theory? I'm so glad. Then, of course, you know this too. Rock, paper, scissors, Spock. Lizard, Spock. And I find this so genius because that's actually one of the game design exercises that game studios give potential game designers. Is like, add an element to rock, paper, scissors. And you have to make sure that the game remains balanced. And how do you do that? Because if you have an element that somehow overpowers all the others, everybody's constantly going to choose that. And what's the fun of that? So you have to make sure that there are just the right relationships, that everything is still working out, and that there is no one strategy that will always win. Yeah, this is so fascinating. It's also inquiring attributes and the affordances of objects and materials is a terrific game design exercise, and I think this is something, spoiler, that you're going to do after this. We also did that as a game design exercise at the University of Vienna with our game design students, and they had to make a game using only a die, a cork, and a rubber band. That was it. No more, no less. And come up with a conflict and a goal and rules, and it had to work somehow. It was always great fun. And these objects, they lend themselves to certain behaviors, and that's why we picked them. It makes it easy to just study it. The cork always floats, but also it rolls. So maybe space is something that can be traversed with the cork. You don't know. Or you could use it as something to put the rubber band around and flip the rubber band, because the intrinsic quality and behavior what the rubber band lends itself, as everybody who was bored in school knows, is it can be flipped. And the dice as a mechanism of chance is always, that's a classic, that just has to be in there somehow. So inquiring about the affordances of objects and components is a really great starting point. And every object has that. Donald Norman wrote about this. He wrote about the problem that Great Britain had with their little bus, like the houses they have at bus stations, and they used to be made of glass. And glass has a very salient affordance, which is to be broken. So vandals just shattered all the glass bus houses. And then the city thought, we should maybe replace it by something with a different affordance. Let's make them of wood. And what happened then? People just sprayed on them, because that's the affordance of wood. You want to paint on it. You want to spray paint on it. So yeah, you cannot win, because there is always something you can do with materials. And I'm getting to the meat. If people say the mechanics of the game, that's mostly what they refer to, and only that. The verbs of the game, the actions that you can perform in the game, the core mechanics of the game. This is where the game truly lives. This is what we design a game for, to afford actions for the player. Through the actions, we gain access to all these wonderful things that we heard before, the stories. We gain access to the experience of the game through the actions we can take. We gain access to the stuff we can learn from a game through the actions that we can take. And you can program a really clever computer that is great at chess, and it will suck at charades because it cannot act it out. So you have to perform for the actions that the player can take. And we've seen before with rock, paper, scissors that some games owe their names to their components and attributes, and some games do owe their names to their verbs, their core mechanics, like hide and seek. So it's very obvious what the core mechanics of hide and seek are, because that's in the title. It's hide and it's seek. Pretty simple. But we can break it down a little bit more, because there are two roles in this game, and it's you can either be the person who hides, or you can be the person who seeks. I actually don't like any of those. I think it's a really scary game, and I will tell you why. But as the hider, you have to run. I'm not good at that. You have to hide. I always hid in the most obvious places. And then the way we played it, you have to make it back if you're discovered as fast as possible and tag some stupid tree before you get tagged. It never worked out for me. And as the seeker, you have to stand there and count. You feel all lost and abandoned because everybody runs away as if you're the bad guy. And you have to come after them, and you seek them, and then you find them, and then they haven't done anything to you, but still you're the persecutor. So anyways, but this is how it works. These are the verbs of this game. And the actions and verbs of a game, they are guided by rules. You cannot do it any old way. You can only do it in the way that the designer wanted you to do it, mostly. And the rules, it helps me a lot to think of them just in if-then relationships. If it's not clear how the rules should be articulated, I just put an if-then in and see if I can formulate it then. That usually helps. And these interdependencies between the actions, the goals, and the rules, that create an interesting experiential structure and a gameplay pattern. And that's where the anxiety comes in when you play hide and seek and you are in the position of the hider. And that gets exploited a lot by our media. And there is a reason for that, because it puts you in the position, it's like the hide and seek structure. It puts you, if you're the hider, in the position of the victim, because all you can do is run away and hope you will not be found. So you cannot fight back. You cannot kick the shining guy in the shins or something. You're always in the weaker position. And this is where the anxiety comes in. Your goal is to survive or not be found. You anticipate to be found. It's like, oh my God, it's going to happen. I cannot even see that somebody's approaching if I'm hit really well. So there is this hopelessness at a certain point. And then once you hear the steps coming closer, blah, 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 it's like, oh, the stress is rising, and I have to run and get away. And it's all coming from this interrelationship between my goal of survival, the action that I'm giving of only running and hiding, and the structure that is set up by the game. So games are about what we can do. The salt of the game is that it gives you meaningful choices. And even a game that has very simple mechanics, maybe just one core mechanic, still offers the player a choice. Because it's sometimes not about giving players a million different actions, but interesting variations in how to use the actions that you're given. So let's be a little bit open-minded about the whole definition of what a game is. I think sports are games too. Tennis, as a game/sport, it has pretty much one core mechanic. Well, it has running and hitting the ball. So very simple, very reduced vocabulary. But how you do that, that's where meaningful choice comes in. This is where skill comes in. So you have agency over how hard do I hit the ball? How soft do I hit it? How high do I hit it? Do I try to trick my opponent by running this way and then that way so they don't see the ball coming, or they think I will do something different and then I do something completely crazy and they're outwitted by me. So this is where this choice comes in, and that's something we want to give the player, that the player can realize themselves within the game structure that we set up for them. Monopoly has many more choices than tennis, for example. And there are things you have control over, where you build the hotel, how you set it all up, what kind of thing you're building, when to sell it, how much to bid in an auction. And then there are things you don't have any control over. It's like when to pay taxes. Is it so much like real life? Or when to pay rent. You just have to do it. But the combination of this gives you a lot of things to choose from, strategies to play, a master plan to come up with. And that makes it really engaging. So to foster meaningful play, two things have to be in place. And it's always good to remind myself of that. The action that you take has to be discernible. So it has to be clear what it means in the larger context of the game. But if I just press the button and then I don't see the consequence, it's not discernible what my action did. So you can forget it. You have to communicate the outcome of an action to the player. And it should be rather immediate, otherwise the player is just lost. And it has to be integrated. So if I perform an action, I do really well at that action, I see what it did, but I have no idea how much closer I'm now to winning the game or how far away I still am due to that action. I don't care. So these two things have to be in place for me to care. Understand what's going on and care about what it means in regard to the bigger goal of the game. So one thing you can do if you want to experiment with the number of choices players have and the emergent behavior of the game is just add a verb. Mod something that already exists and throw in another verb. For example, Pac-Man. Really simple game. Add a hiding mechanic. So maybe there's just part of the maze that's a safe zone, and you hide there and wait until the ghosts pass you. Let's see what happens. Maybe nothing. Or you could add a sticky tongue mechanic that at certain times you can just throw out your sticky tongue and get to one of these pills sooner and reverse the odds. Let's see what happens with that. Maybe that's interesting. Maybe it's not. Maybe they knew what they were doing. But it's interesting to experiment with these things. And what makes a really elegant design is if you add one component or one verb that acts on different things in the game. So not one thing, not three things that do one thing, but one thing that does three things. So for example, if you add hammering to a game, not necessarily Pac-Man, you could use the hammer to break objects, but maybe also fix some things that are bent out of shape. And maybe you can also use it to make impressions on the surface to write something. So that's really interesting. It's just one simple thing the player gets, but it has all these different functions that you could use it for. And maybe sometimes it also makes sense to subtract something, because the design gets overloaded and convoluted, and you want to distill it down to something that's much more elegant and much simpler. And most designs, in my experience, benefit enormously from cutting stuff than adding stuff. So players want to win, but only if you give them something interesting to do. And it's just not very interesting if the goal is to turn on the light bulb, to flip the switch, and to win. So conflict is really important. Challenge, something they want to achieve. And that's one definition of a game. It's a simple task made difficult. Who invented golf? I mean, come on. It's a walk in the park with lots of holes in it. This is the most inefficient way of putting a ball into a tiny hole over a long distance by using a club. Who came up with a very playful person? Or pool. I love pool. Very inefficient way of getting a ball in a pocket. You use a stick, you hit a ball with the stick, the ball hits another ball, and then that ball maybe goes into a pocket. crazy, but it's engaging too, because it's like playing around with the things that are at my disposal and using it in new and creative ways. And this is where innovation usually comes in, with play. So a game's learning potential, I think we heard this from a much better source today, thanks to Jim G. But a game's learning potential resides in this relationship between the game's goal and the things I need to do to reach it. They have to be integrated. What I do in a moment-to-moment basis, that's what I'm going to take away. That's what I'm going to understand and learn from the game. When players want to win, they do go to great lengths to understand how these rules work and master these conflicts and the challenges that the game presents to them. But they learn mostly through the things they experience and do in the games. And this is where I don't know exactly how much time I have left, but I just have to tell you this story before I go on, okay, to my case study. There has been this game about teaching kids about learning the names of fishes in the ocean. And the people who designed that game had this brilliant idea. We were going to build a simulation of the ocean and a submarine, and the kids will ride in the submarine through the ocean, and they steer it, and then the fishes float by, swim by, and the names of the fishes will pop up, and they get first-hand experience and encounter with the fishes. What are they most likely to learn when they play the game? Steering a submarine. Exactly, because that's what you do. The fishes are not relevant to winning the game at all, so they can be easily ignored. All right. So a small case study to how all of these different things apply to a game with a very serious content and purpose. Elude. It's a game that I made when I was still at MIT with a team of a small team of students, like 7 students from both Singapore and MIT. And it's a game about depression. And I worked with it. I worked on it with a psychotherapist from Harvard Med School. And our goal was obviously not to cure depression with a game, because that would be really hard, and there are better means to do that. But to inform friends and relatives of people who suffer from depression what their loved ones are going through, because there's a lot of anger they have to deal with and a lot of tension they have themselves, because they just don't understand what's happening, why somebody cannot hold a job or get out of bed and stuff like that. So this is where we felt a game would be a perfect medium to give some insight into the experience of depression. And that's quite a design challenge for a game. So we decided to, after a lot of back and forth, embrace subjectivity, really go for what it feels like, not be preachy about it, this is how you break out of it. But really, if we want to understand how somebody who suffers from depression feels like, let's do it very subjectively. Let's just model the experience of it as good as we can, even though it's just a part of it. I did a lot of research. It was not a happy time. Depression is all about loss. I think most of us have some understanding of how it works, but the more I read about it and the more I talked to people about it, the bleaker the whole thing got. So there is nothing there. Loss of goals, loss of self, loss of voice, loss of focus, loss of playfulness. Games are all about play. How are you going to make a game about depression when games are all about play and choices and agency and expansiveness? It's a state of mind that you want to experience when you play a game, and it's all stripped away when you're in a depressive state. So the way to go about this was, in order to make this feeling of loss tangible, to also model that which is lost in the process. To set up a goal for people they want to achieve and let them achieve it and then take it away. It's really, really mean. And I did start with space as the central design element to this, to get a handle on this really complex, abstract idea. And the space in Elude is a metaphorical space. It's an emotional landscape. It models the emotional landscape of somebody who suffers from depression. And we set this rather sad-looking boy into this space. And no, we were not aware of limbo. It looks a lot like that, but we were not. And the goal of the game is to tap your happiness potential. Everybody has a potential for happiness, even if you're chronically depressed. So that's the goal that we set up. And happiness was represented by a space that was expansive and bright, and you could jump on these leaves. It was very free, very fluid, and it didn't have a lot of restrictions. It was just pure play. The conflict in the game is the mood struggle itself. So we used a spatial metaphor for good is up and bad is down to organize the game space and also the actions in the game. So you want to get up to where it's happy. You don't want to be dragged down to where it's very sad. And you have to make an effort as far as you can, and that's exactly the point. The game is not purely based on skill. It did not want to suggest that you could beat depression by being more skillful. There are just moments when you feel like all the agency you have is stripped away from you. And this is not trying to model a realistic clinical understanding of depression, but really what it feels like to somebody who suffers from it. So this is the game structure that came out of these observations, that you start in a normal state, and you can get to a happy state. You have all time in the world to do that, and nothing keeps you from it. It can take for as long as you need to get to a happy state, because the goal of this is great, this is awesome, I want to be there, had to be established. And then the second time around, the second cycle, you had a choice. You could either make it to happy again because you were skillful, or you could not do it in time and get dragged down to the depression state. And then you resurfaced again into normal, and then you had no choice the third time around, the third cycle. You just got dragged back into depression, and then it's either coming out of it again or staying in the depressive state for a longer time. So the core mechanics were walk and jump, and in the jump itself, that's like a mini interpretation of up is good and bad is down. So you have to exert some force, you have to make an effort to get up, and that's already within the core mechanic of the game. So it fit very well with the space and everything. So, and of course, we populated the game space with components, and the vine component, these black tentacles that look really threatening, that's your depression. It's coming after you. It's coming from underneath. It's trying to drag you down, while you're trying to jump your way up from branch to branch into the happy sunny state on top of the tree crowns. This is what happens when you get dragged down by the vines. This is one of the sequences. You find yourself in this really enclosed space. You can walk around, but there's nowhere you can go. And this is what happens. It's like quicksand. You get sucked into the next level. It's like even more enclosed. And by taking away this agency and presenting these images and just having this one action that you could take that doesn't lead anywhere, it models the futility of this experience and the hopelessness. And then you get back up. It takes into account that a depressive phase will pass with time, and you will be able to walk out of it if you take that opportunity. And then another component that was really important to us to capture in this concept was the component of passion. If you have passion in your life, it will lead you to your goal. And we represented that by means of these birds. And the attributes of the birds are they act as power-ups. So you have to go up to them and you have to make this really annoying humming. Well, you press a button, it makes this really annoying humming sound. Oh, and then it's like identifying your passion in your life. You seek things, and then if you are aware and open, something might resonate. You send out, hey, I'm looking for you. And then if it's there, it resonates. And that gives you passion. So same thing with the birds. You hum out to them, they resonate, they have these glowy particle stuff. You collect them, they give you a power-up, and you can jump higher. So they help you to reach your goal. That's the one function. but to also model that passion is something that's lost, the meaning in life is reduced as you enter depressive phase. When it gets darker and the vines start coming up, the birds take flight. And that's what they do in real life too. When there is danger approaching, birds are out of there. They don't want to stick around. So this is another aspect of the bird, an attribute that we integrated into this metaphor. Let's see if this works. Yeah, just a quick trailer to give you an insight. Okay, everybody's always very silent after that. I apologize. Last slide, things to keep in mind. Give the player a worthy goal, set up meaningful choices, have cool core mechanics, verbs for them, and create some interesting conflict. Thank you.